All right, James, we're good to go. Good to see you.
Yeah, hi. It's a pleasure. Pleasure, Daniel.
All right, Lauren, fire away. What have you got for James?
My question is, what made you join Bridge to Bitcoin?
Ah, well, I didn't so much join it as set it up with a couple of other guys that I met at the football up at Real Bedford. So shortly after Pete McCormack had bought the club before he rebranded it to Real Bedford, and I think it was still called Bedford FC. Um, I've been listening to his podcast, so I thought, well, I want to go and meet some Bitcoiners in real life because at that stage, my whole Bitcoin journey had just been me and books and a computer. And so I went up to meet some other Bitcoiners. And over the first couple of weeks of going to watch the football, I met Simon, who you know very well, who runs Bitcoin Events UK. He also runs Northamptonshire Meetup Group, and also met Chris, who runs the Surrey Group. And at the time, Chris didn't run the Surrey group, and I didn't run a group either. I subsequently set up Berkshire Bitcoiners, but we all kind of talked, went out to the pub afterwards, and kind of we hit upon a thing that was certainly an issue that I'd had, and I think everyone agreed, which was this kind of last mile of Bitcoin use, which is completing that last mile to actually being able to spend it. Because if you still need to convert it back into fiat in order to acquire the goods and services you need, then you're still dependent on government money. And so you haven't quite finished the job. So for us, we thought, well, what can we do? Let's work in the UK and try and take that forward, you know. So yeah, I didn't join it. I co-founded it, I guess. Yeah, that's the answer.
Wow, okay.
Any follow-up questions?
Um,
Do you know what they do?
no, I was just about to ask that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, let me try and phrase this. What does Bridge to Bitcoin do?
So we onboard businesses. Our main focus is the UK to accept Bitcoin. So that's what we've been doing now for 2.5 years. And in that time, we've seen businesses in the UK. This isn't all our work. I mean, obviously, Bitcoiners around the country go out. We've got a volunteer group as well. So it's not necessarily the case that we do all of it. But I think what we've created is a kind of a hub of knowledge and kind of expertise in doing this. So yes, we do some of it, but we also help other people and provide leaflets and guidance on how best to go about it. And in that time, since sort of Q2 2022, I think at that time there were around about 30 businesses in the UK that were accepting Bitcoin. So really not very many at all. And that was, you think Bitcoin was what, 13 years old then? And today it's 15, nearly 16 years old, and we've got about 450 businesses now in the UK. So if you drew a graph with the x-axis running from 2009 to 2024, you can see what it looks like at this end of the graph. It's very much a hockey stick. So yeah, we may have played our part in that, but it's not due to us. It's because I think the technology has just moved on so fast and it's removing all the complexity in onboarding merchants. So we typically now can onboard a merchant on a Zoom call. So we don't even have to visit them. We just have a Zoom call, go through to chat about their business, and then we can literally get them sorted out whilst that Zoom call's on and they're good to go. So it's the technology innovations, particularly the Lightning Network, and then applications sitting on top of the Lightning Network, both wallets and point of sale solutions, that all come together to make it really easy now to do. Yeah, so that's what we do, and it's changed a lot since we started.
Do you know what James means by the word onboard or onboarding a customer?
Um, I understand what it means, but I don't know how to explain it. It's like getting in a customer, like explaining how it works.
Yeah, 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 that's right. My wife hates it. Whenever I say, what are you using these stupid words for, like on board? But yeah, that's exactly right. It's what it means.
Yeah, just basically setting them up to be able to accept Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And so what's the latest and greatest kind of tools that you're using at the moment? Obviously, there's no perfect scenario,
Yeah.
but obviously you guys are doing this on a daily basis and have done it hundreds of times. So you've got way more data points than most of us, solo orange pillars out on the street. So you've got a much better, broader sense of what works, what's the most robust.
Yeah. So what we recommend depends upon the business themselves, and so how many staff they've got, locations, points where they actually accept money. And it can be as simple for a one-man band just running a sort of takeaway truck or something like that. I mean, really, they could probably get away with just a simple wallet, a Lightning wallet. But if you move up and you've got a business with 2 or 3 people that take money, and you maybe want to be able to download the data for the accounting and all that sort of stuff, then today, and as you rightly recognize there, Daniel, things change very quickly because there's constant innovation happening. But today, the most popular recommendation that we make is Swiss Bitcoin Pay for the point of sale solution, and then underneath a wallet of Satoshi for collecting the sats. So the Swiss solution, which is the code's on GitHub, by the way, so they're not trying to kind of build the biggest business in the world. They it's just a great solution, and ideally, if other people are out there, you can take the code and implement your own version of it, so we can multiply this, which would be very good for diversifying risk and sort of points of attack as well, because we don't want every business in the country running on Swiss Bitcoin Pay, otherwise it's clearly a target. So that app is effectively an invoicing and routing app. So what it does is allows the merchant to tap in the bill in pounds or whatever your local currency is, and it generates a Bitcoin Lightning invoice at the live price in terms of a QR code, and then the customer can scan that from their Lightning wallet. It routes the payment to the owner's wallet of Satoshi, or any wallet that they've got which has got a Lightning address. It could be Strike, it could be Blink, it could be any number of different wallets with a Lightning address, or indeed their own node. But clearly, running a Lightning node is not something that your typical business is. You knock on the door, oh yeah, I run a node, I've got a Lightning node, it's all cool, but we didn't accept Bitcoin. There's a long journey between starting out for a business and getting to an entirely self-sovereign setup. So that's not really a runner for a new business. Their focus is what they do, not running IT, which is how they see it at the beginning. So, but the wallet Satoshi is only a collecting wallet. So you can think of it as your cash till. You collect the payments in there, and then we talk to them at that point. We say, by the way, this is a custodial wallet, by the time, if that money gets to £500, £1,000, it's your decision on a risk basis, but be aware you're trusting this third party, and they could go bankrupt, they could run away with the funds, they could get hacked. There's all sorts of things that could happen. There's a risk, and you don't need to take that risk with Bitcoin. So we talked to them very briefly about self-custody, because by this stage everything's new. They've downloaded a point of sale app, they've downloaded a Lightning wallet. It's all like wow. So we don't want to go too far down that road because it's not immediately relevant, but we warn them about it. We typically send them a link to BTC Sessions video on self-custody wallets, and then we say, look, get back in touch with us when if you get to that stage and you've got questions. We also point them in the direction of Satoshi Labs. They run for Trezor, so they run a kind of onboarding, for pay that you pay, I think it's €100 or so, and they will set you up live on a call, so they kind of handhold you through that process. So we do make it clear that this is only a kind of collecting point. It's not the final destination for your sats. So that's quite a long answer to, but that's the most common one that we use at the moment. But if we're talking in 2 or 3 months, it could be different.
Yeah,
and it would be, right. And it might be different in different parts of the world as well, particularly on the collecting wallet. Although as far as I'm aware, Swiss Bitcoin Pay works everywhere in the world. it would probably work on the moon as well. I just don't think there's anywhere that it wouldn't work. In fact, one of the other things that we do is we talk to equivalent groups of Bitcoiners around the world, and we just had a call with a group in Paraguay this last week, and showed them what we do, showed them Swiss Bitcoin Pay, and indeed, I saw this morning that someone had sent me a message on Signal and said we've onboarded our first merchant, not the first merchant to take Bitcoin in Paraguay, but the first one that they'd onboarded. So yeah, so that's it. So we do help other people around the world just replicate what we're doing as well.
Excellent. Any further questions, Lauren?
No, I think I can leave this all to you.
Okay.
All
Cool.
right.
Thank you very
so
much.
Thanks, Lauren. That's great questions. Thank you.
Oh, Lauren, did you see his little hodler?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see that. Yeah.
Have you seen one live? Have you seen one in real life?
Yeah, I have
you have,
two.
She's got a few upstairs, but not the football one.
Not the football one.
Of,
let me just go and bring it so you can see it.
Yeah.
It's a must-have.
That one.
A must-have.
Yeah, Samuel would enjoy it. Yeah, it definitely. Right. Okay. I didn't realize they even existed.
You didn't?
It's a
Not
Rail
the
Bedford
football
one. It's a Rail Bedford
yeah.
one.
I
Yeah.
knew this.
Did
Yeah.
you know the Rail Bedford had plushies? I didn't know. Right. Right, James. So
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to learn more about Bridge to Bitcoin, if they just go to Once Bitten Podcast and just type in Bridge to Bitcoin, we did a whole episode before with you.
Right at the
Simon
beginning.
and
Yeah, it was
Chris.
right early days, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
we've been
So they can go back and listen to that as well. And just find bridgetobitcoin.com or .co.uk, which one?
It's .com, and we're at Bridge to Bitcoin on Twitter as well. So yeah, you can do
Excellent.
that.
But we wanted to do this one to talk about a different topic, about Bitcoiners exiting their legacy fiat careers and bringing their skill set into the Bitcoin space, and how important that is, and just kind of follow your own journey, because it's an interesting one, and I think most people would be interested to know that you're not a 24-year-old shadowy supercoder. You're a distinguished gentleman, shall we say?
You mean old?
I mean old, yeah. With a long career in the corporate world, primarily out of the UK, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, so I love having just a whole different breadth of people come on the show and talk about how Bitcoin has affected their thinking and their life and their future, because as we all sit here watching number go up, it's nice to all sing Kumbaya around the campfire once every 4 years. That's great, but there is something bigger at stake here.
Yeah.
So let's I think you already had kind of a mind map of where you wanted to take this story. So I'll hand it over to you, and then I'll just dig in at certain points and needle the areas that I think might be resonating with some of the listeners.
Sure. Well, what prompted it actually was listening to your pod. Was it, I don't know, 2-3 months ago with John McCabe? And I think I listened to that and it was like, oh, this is really amazing. And obviously that's quite a lot of what he's talking about is adjacent to what we're doing in Bridge to Bitcoin in terms of bringing sort of customer rewards into the Bitcoin space. So the sorts of things that you get on credit cards or payment cards. Now, it's really, really interesting. And then I think at the end, you just said, if you've got any stories about how you're bringing your old sort of work life experience into Bitcoin, tap me up. So I immediately did.
And John's story was at least a minimum 10-year career, maybe even longer at MasterCard.
That's right. Yeah.
Now fully focused on bringing that skill set and his experience to the Bitcoin space. So anyone can go back and listen to that one too. So kick us off, man. Like, what was your whole career path then?
Yeah, so apart from a bit of messing around when I was young, I eventually wound up. I'd done a little sort of startup myself based upon a piece of technology that had been invented by physics professor at Cardiff University that allowed you to float things in the air using magnetic control system. This was in the late 90s. And anyway, it was an amazing thing. And I kind of worked with them, but I, made no money and had no money because I was young and had never had a proper job really. And so I had a couple of big possible orders, but I thought, well, if they don't, I've done as much as I can on this. I've spent a year on this. It's really great, but I'm not really making any money, so I need to do something. So I went to the sort of local temping office. I think it was Alfred Marks at the time. It's now a Deco. Don't know if even a Deco exists, but anyway, you go along, you say they sort of interview you briefly. I think then I did a Word test and an Excel test or something, and they said, oh yeah, we've got a job for you starting on Monday. So I was like, okay, fine, I'll go along. And I turned up at this business on the Monday morning, all suited and booted, and sat there in reception for about half an hour. There seemed to be some commotion. I didn't really know. Eventually, the lady came over to me. She said, "Oh, sorry, the agency's got it wrong. We haven't got a job. It's next week it starts." But I tell you what, we've got a job in another office across the road. Do you want to go and do a day's work there? This was Prudential, right, in Reading, and so I said, yeah, all right then. Why not? I didn't really care. I was just looking to earn some money. And so I went across, did a day's photocopying. And then at the end of the day, I said, should I come back tomorrow? And they went, yeah, okay. So my photocopying was obviously up to par. So I came back the next day. And then at the end of the week on the Friday, I said, should I come back next week? And he went, yeah, okay. So and that's it. That was in February 1999. And then I stayed there for over 20 years, and ended up in finance, training as an accountant, running finance system, building finance system solutions in Cognos, business objects, and then eventually leading that team, and then eventually becoming the head of finance systems in another business unit. And involved in all sorts of things, and worked in London for a number of years, in various different business units. So obviously, it was a large global organization spanning Asia, Europe, the UK, America, as well, the US, and eventually, sort of towards the end, there were some big restructures, and I got an opportunity to take a package during COVID. In fact, it was just by chance, and given that I'd never really intended to work there in the first place, I thought, yeah, this is the chance to sort of go and see what else I could do. So I did a research master's degree in finance and accounting, because I thought, well, just to sort of tide me over, I'll go and learn some new stuff, and it'll help me think about things a little bit, give me a bit of time.
What age were you at that? What age were you at that point?
I was 51 at that stage.
Right.
51.
Wow, man.
So it's
Photocopier, from photocopier to one to a very senior position within Prudential. Amazing.
Yeah, but I think that used to be normal. I mean, I don't know. Well, not normal. It's not how everyone got their graduate or career jobs, but I think messing around, ending up I know several peers in my age group who did this sort of stuff. They randomly ended up at a business, and their skill set fitted really well. And then some senior managers spotted them and kind of mentored them, and kind of basically it worked for both sides for a long time. And I think it was, whether it still happens or not, I don't know. But it's a really good way for many people to find a good job in a company that fits both ways. So
when you were, I'm trying to paint the picture here of, you're now sitting there, you've done the hard yards, you're 10 to 15 years into your career, and now the fresh meat, in air quotes, that's coming into the business are all, they've got degrees up to their eyeballs, right? They've had the 4 years at college. I'm pretty sure you probably weren't relying on temp staff coming through from the local agency and working their way up.
No, I mean, we did occasionally, so I know as a manager, we did occasionally get people who come in and you'd go, oh, they're good. And you'd sort of, and they probably have, I had a degree as well, and they probably got a degree, but they haven't applied for a graduate job, but you'd spot them and you'd go, right, yeah, this one's a keeper. So, yeah, and you'd sort of you'd have a chat with them, try and work out where they were coming from, what their life ambitions and plans were, and then sort of, see if you could find a fit for them in the organization. So it did. I know it did still happen, but to what extent, I don't know. And obviously today I'm another sort of probably 5, 6, 7 years on since I kind of last encountered that scenario. Because even in my last couple of years, I was probably not at the level where I would necessarily see that kind of thing happening on the ground. Someone else might report it to me rather than me actually doing it, if you see what I mean. Yeah. So whether it's still a reality, it certainly would be a very effective way for businesses to recruit and for the people to find the right jobs as well. Because it also, if you do it the temping way, nobody's worried. You turn up and you leave after a week. That's the deal, I mean, that's how it works. So nobody's kind of having to sign contracts for probation or it's just a lot easier, a lot cheaper to do, and probably the result a lot better than the lengthy interview process.
This whole idea of people coming in with degrees, it's broken on both sides, because they're coming in with a certain sense of entitlement, because I've got the degree, don't you know? I've studied this for 4 years. And the people hiring them are like, don't give a fuck. Like, sit down and listen to what I'm about to tell you, because all the theory that you've just been taught by somebody that's never run a business is just theory. You're about to get the practical side of things. And if your personality doesn't fit with the team, and if your work ethic or values doesn't fit with the team, no amount of degree is going to save you. You're going to be gone. And
I agree. It also allows a lot more kind of like humility on both sides. If you start out where there's no contract, there's not been any selection, you've just pitched up in your suit and you put to work. Neither side's got any real expectations of each other, and so you can just kind of be yourself, and not have to feel that you're the new grad that's got to solve all the business problems, which is a completely ridiculous idea, but it's understandable that people think that that's how it might be, because as you say, they've got all the bits of paper that show that they can potentially do this, that, and the other. They don't really appreciate the difference between potentially and actually.
So you're 51. You've had this long career. Financial. What did you say it was? Structured finance.
Finance systems. So no, I had one foot in finance, one foot in IT. So we brought in software, corporate software that did business intelligence, enterprise planning, modeling, cost management solutions in IT as well. It's a sort of former specialist cost allocation. So yeah, lots of interesting and varied corporate style software. In fact, interestingly, one company that
I know what you're going to say. It was going to be my question. So come on.
Yeah, one company that I knew about because they were on the Gartner quadrants all the way through, and business intelligence was MicroStrategy.
Right.
So they were always in the Gartner quadrants when we were looking at new solutions. MicroStrategy was always there. We never chose them for any of our solutions, but it was so weird when, in 2020, like MicroStrategy buying Bitcoin. Oh, well, that's interesting. I've heard of them. So that was a weird kind of link back to
probably one of the few Bitcoiners that had ever heard of them, because none of us had, right? I'm sure some had, if you're in that business and if you're using their systems, but I've never come across someone that was using their like business data analytics.
Yeah, no, I'd seen it demoed once or twice, couldn't remember, it's so long ago. But they were always there on the quadrant. So when you were looking at a new piece of software, you'd look at the businesses and their strengths and weaknesses in different areas, before you started a selection process, and they were always there. So yeah, you were
interesting. All right, so now you're 51, you're a mature student, you're in you're in the university halls of residence.
Well, actually, it was fortunately because of COVID, as it turns out, it was actually a virtual course. So,
of course,
and actually, a lot of the students were global. So you dial into Teams call or a Zoom call, and people would be there from all over the world. It was out of the University of Northampton, though, so it was quite it was British based, but international focus. And it was just a research master's. So it was learn how to do research. And I thought I'd be researching enterprise planning software, business intelligence, see if there was some area in there that I could do some research in, possibly before going on and continuing to do something in that vein in the future. But the 101 course was how to choose your research topic. And they went through a few things. And they said one of the really important things is you must be really interested in it. So to sustain your energy and to really enjoy the course and ultimately get a good result. And I was like, okay, fine. I think for a lot of the people on the course, they'd been sent by their companies, so they probably quite focused on what they were going to do. The companies had probably told them, well, something like this or like that. But obviously I was paying my own way. So I was like, okay, well, I'll give it a go. So I was dovetailing this with finishing at the Peru. So I was still working whilst getting this off the ground so that I didn't just sort of stop and then start again. And so I was really, really busy trying to do both things at once towards the end. And I remember sitting in on Eurostar on February half term on a Friday night, probably heading to the Alps to go skiing with the family, shooting through France in the middle of the night, kids asleep on the floor. And there I was trying to, okay, so what's my topic going to be? And I was typing out on a PowerPoint things that I was interested in. So they said, you must be interested in the topic. So I wrote down mathematics, because I'd originally done a maths degree, computer science, economics, finance, personal finance. And I just stared at this screen. And then the word, and I apologize for this, but I was new, I was fresh, the word cryptocurrencies came into my head. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's interesting. I don't know anything about that. Heard of it, but yeah, that would be really cool. I could do some research on that. So there and then on the train, I did a couple of LinkedIn learning courses, which I'd got access to because of my job at the Peru. So it was all, you get all these you get all this kind of functionality that gets provided to you when you work for large corporates. So I did a blockchain course and a cryptocurrency course there and then that night on the train. It's like, yeah, this is really good. So I spoke to my supervisor and she's like, okay, yeah, let's, I don't know what you're going to do though. I mean, you can't just go, I'm going to research cryptocurrency. So I constructed some idea, which they signed off as my proposal. And then I started researching and I read a couple of books and a couple of journals. And then the third book I read was The Bitcoin Standard by Safety. And I read that cover to cover in 24 hours and went, oh, right. I thought about it for a day or two, and then I thought I need to get in touch with my supervisor because what I've proposed to research is just a waste of time. I went back to her and said, I need to research Bitcoin instead. And I said, I think, maybe Bitcoin versus gold, something like that. And she's like, well, it's not really the done thing. Once you've got your proposal signed off, you're supposed to do that research. But anyway, I managed to get it through. So that's what I ended up researching, and then finished that at the end of 2020, and then spent 2021 going down loads of rabbit holes, all of the normal learning that everyone does, all of the books, the videos, the podcasts, not having to worry about its citation quality or what academics had reviewed it, or any of the, because when you do research, it's in the way the academic world works is, you can only put in so many books. You have to have a lot of journal citations. And honestly, most of it's rubbish. I mean, if you think that the Bitcoin white paper, obviously was not an academic journal, it's like that just tells you all you need to know about how this works. It's really just a process, in my view, rather than a valuable outcome. Now, what I learned in that year of doing it was definitely valuable for my subsequent learning, but it wasn't any research that had any valuable output, because I think that to produce valuable output in Bitcoin, there's a lot you've got to understand and learn and experience before you get to that point. It's a very, very deep and complex and expansive sort of topic. And so even to become an expert in an area where you can start adding value is extremely, takes a lot of time. And I guess that's kind of what we're talking about here, is how do you get to the point where you can start to bring other skills into Bitcoin? Because yeah, I mean, I'm not a coder. I mean, I might have written some corporate software models, but they're sort of designed for relatively smart people to build in businesses. Like, you don't have to be an IT geek to do it. You know, you just, it's not complex languages. The structure's kind of made easy-ish for you as a business person to build models. So I wasn't IT, and so getting into finding a role for yourself in Bitcoin is very difficult if you don't have those kinds of backgrounds. Maybe in IT, maybe in what are the other sort of areas? Things like building financial products, or being a financial advisor. Maybe there's stuff that's kind of a bit more obvious there. What you tend to find, a lot of people who don't have those skills, you know, maybe like yourself, although you do have a financial services background, don't you, Daniel? I remember.
Yes.
Yeah. You do self-starting stuff like writing books or writing podcasts or becoming artists in one form or another, which is great. But if you're sort of corporate guy like me, that's not really possibly not going to be the route that you take. So anyway, 2021, I did all this extra learning, and then at the end of 2021, I thought I also did Gary Gensler's course, actually.
His MIT course.
Yeah, that was really good. And when he got made, it's interesting, when he got made chair of the SEC, I thought that's good. You know, I thought he really knows his stuff. But what I didn't appreciate was essentially the political nature of that appointment, and you become captured effectively, don't you? I mean, I'd love to be able to have a private conversation and say, what did you really think about what you were doing? Because I kind of think that what he actually did versus what he must have known to be the right thing to do, I just get the feeling that those two things were diametrically opposed, probably, in that particular administration. I don't know that, but it's a sense I have when I compare his free intellectual thought as the lecturer on that course. Well, not just the lecturer, he wrote it. It's quite clear, has a very, very deep understanding of this area. And, anyway.
Yeah, I think exactly the same as you, mate. And if anybody's not seen the lectures that he's given, just they're free on YouTube. You can just watch them.
It's open MIT, I think, and right. It's from the fall, because it's in America, obviously, the fall 2018, and it's called, what's it called? It's a long time ago now. Anyway, yeah, look up Gary Gensler Open MIT, and I'm sure it'll pop up. So then it was like, well, if I'm going to, through 2021 as well, I was reallocating my pension, my retirement assets, because I got, you know, fingers crossed, maybe up to 40 years to live. I'm in my mid-50s. And suddenly, like, one of the biggest assets that I had, which was a defined benefit, otherwise known as a final salary pension, from having been an employee at a company, at Prudential for more than 20 years. And that's a valuable, you know, that was kind of considered like the gold standard of a pension scheme. But as I was learning about Bitcoin, I started to realize that really it's just a bond. And then I'm like, oh shit, maybe this isn't quite as good as I thought it was. Started to realize, well, it's good now, but what if in 20 years my monthly payment only buys a loaf of bread? What am I going to do? You know? So I started allocating more to Bitcoin as a hedge against that scenario, so that if that were to happen, well, that's basically because our fiat currencies are collapsing, and so that's probably in the space of Bitcoin doing better. So I thought, well, that'll be a reasonable hedge. So I was allocating more and more to Bitcoin, and then as you do that, I think your whole sort of perspective starts to shift. And you start to realize that, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? Well, am I going to go and work for more fiat? No, I'm not going to go and get another job like that, am I? Because that's not what I'm interested in now. Like, I'm not interested in enterprise planning software or business intelligence software. Sorry, Michael Saylor, I'm not. I'm interested in your equity, but I'm not interested in your business intelligence software anymore, other than as a route for you to issue convertibles. But I am really interested in Bitcoin and have been now obsessed with it for 3 or 4 years. So I need to go and meet some other people. So that's what I did. And that's what Ellen was drawing out at the beginning about meeting Simon and Chris and setting up Bridge to Bitcoin. And all of these things were just kind of, I'm still doing them all, but they're kind of, what do? You just take the next step in front of you. You go and meet people, you have conversations, you have ideas, and you just execute them and see what happens. And that's been a great journey. But it took me really until the back end of last year until I started to be able to bring together the skills and the kind of experience that I'd had from the past together with my Bitcoin knowledge. So it took probably getting on for 4 years for me to get to that place, certainly 3.5 years. Because it's one thing understanding a bit about a point of sale solution and some lightning wallets and knocking on doors and having chats with merchants, and that's great fun, and it gives you really interesting to see the exposure to talk to lots and lots of different small businesses over the last 3 or 4 years and get a bit under the skin of how they work and just the social relationships that you build with working with people and using their businesses, going to their pubs or their restaurants or cafes as a customer as well after onboarding them. But those are sort of, if you like, easy businesses in the sense that everybody understands them, right? Where I worked, my parents used to say to me, well, what do you do? What do you do? I said, and I'd start telling them what I did, and they just glaze over. They had no idea what I did. And I don't know whether your job in finance was sometimes similar. You try and explain what you did, and people are like, well, is that a job?
Mm-hmm. My mother-in-law thought I worked at the at one of the currency exchange booths,
right,
in town or something. No, because I worked in foreign exchange.
Yeah.
Oh, can you get down to get us some holiday money? And like Claire would say, it doesn't work in like the booths. Like, there's, like your 150 euros. That's like, no, he's dealing with like tens of millions, mum. Like, it's different.
Yeah. So the complexity and the specialization that exists in corporations and how corporations exist and how their compliance systems work, how their risks are managed, how their finance work, those things are so complicated. So you don't just walk in and go, oh, do you fancy accepting Bitcoin? That's just not, it's just not the thing. And many of them, of course, are business to business anyway. And things like Bridge to Bitcoin, really, it needs to start at the business to consumer because that's where the Bitcoin customers lie. There aren't that many businesses who have Bitcoin to be a B2B customer. I mean, it's increasing now, but it's certainly 2 or 3 years ago, just very, very few on the ground. So I guess it was a gradual progression, and then I started to realize that risk. So risk and finance, again, as you'll be aware, are kind of two sides of the same coin. And that sort of morphed into this idea, well, if you've got this technology that is coming along, maybe an allegory might be the internet, and you think it's growing, you think it's going to carry on growing. You might be wrong, but if you think that it has a reasonable chance or some level of material chance of happening, how dramatic would that be for a business, any business? I mean, sure, the pub can start accepting Bitcoin and actually pretty much carry on, but for a corporate, well, that might be really, really significant, depending on what industry they're in, maybe significant various functions within the corporate itself. So maybe certain functions within the corporate be more affected than other functions, and certain corporates in different marketplace verticals might be affected differently from others. So okay, well, are they looking at, are corporations looking at this? Are they looking at Bitcoin and thinking, is the rise of Bitcoin, are there any threats there? Or are there any opportunities? Is it on our risk register, essentially? So that was my kind of first idea was, okay. And so I did a quick scan of the FTSE 100 annual reports and went to look through their kind of risk reporting. And I think basically couldn't find Bitcoin anywhere. I could find a couple of banks, I think, that mentioned cryptocurrencies, but that was it. And so I'm like, right, well, that looks like from where I'm sitting, that looks like a potentially quite a big miss. And they have a duty of care to their shareholders to, be good custodians of the value that shareholders invest in their business. And that's why the risk register is important. I mean, yes, from a day-to-day perspective, it can end up as a bit of a kind of tick box process exercise. But at a strategic level, it's really important. It's really important that corporations understand the big things that might come along, and especially the things that they can do something about. Now, we can have earthquakes and we can have famines and we can have pandemics and things like that, where you're just almost holding your hands up. Maybe you've got some sort of virtualization that you can do so that people can work from home, all of the things that you try and do. But in the end, there's not much you can do about an earthquake. It's going to happen if it happens. And if you're there, then you just have to deal with it as it happens. But with something like this, with a piece of technology, actually, there are lots of things that you can do. I mean, the first thing you can do is you can just assess it. You can just learn a bit about it. That doesn't mean everybody in the organization, but you can allocate 1 or 2 people to just go and learn about it. And maybe maybe one in finance, one in risk, go and have a look at this, find a bit about it and report back, tell us we're going to add it to our risk register if you think there's any likelihood of this happening, and then we'll take it from there. So a bit of education for a couple of people, go and do some research, bring it back, maybe speak to people like me, for instance. Now I'm offering myself up, who might be able to come and advise as to things that you might think about in terms of threats. But it's not just about threats. It's not just about the way that it might challenge certain products or channels or ways you do business. But there's also a huge opportunity there opening up for those corporations, and not just on their balance sheets. I mean, I know that everyone's obsessed with what's going on with MicroStrategy and Semler and Metaplanet, and that is one thing that you can do. But there's an awful lot of other stuff too. And so yeah, that was where it started. And I've done a couple of presentations with SEMA, it's Institute of Management Accountants. With their sister partner organization in the US is the AICPA, AICPA. The AICPA SEMA are kind of one organization now. And yeah, that went okay. And we've done a presentation to a board of a FTSE 100, a small FTSE 100 company. And they were interesting things to do, but I felt like I kind of needed to create some basis for my if you know what I'm trying to do, that gives me a bit more authority. So I was speaking to a couple of other Bitcoiners, one in Ireland, another one in London, who got similar kind of professional backgrounds. And I think Krista Edmonds, who was with Bitcoin Policy, went off to Canada. She was also interested. She got a background with Barclays, but she got, had moved to Canada and then getting used to life over there. And I think she set up, what was the group she set up? Is it, it's not Femme Orange, is it? Or is it? No.
Femmes Orange is Rachel Gay.
Yeah, she set up something similar in Canada and North America anyway.
Right.
Just the name of it slips my mind now. So she kind of moved away a little bit, but we got introduced to Mi Primer Bitcoin in El Salvador, and so we thought, well, let's write a corporate version of the education curriculum that they've created, and do it the same way, do it via them, with their sort of coordination, and then we can open source that to the world. So that's what we've been doing for the last 6 to 9 months. And we're about 2/3 of the way through writing it. And I think that, first of all, it helps you sort of bring some other skill sets in who've got knowledge of other maybe market verticals that you don't have so much knowledge about. Helps you kind of do that in a more, I think writing a book can be quite a lonely thing. I mean, you've done that, haven't you, Dan?
Yeah.
Is that right? Is it a lonely?
Yes. Yeah, it's you against your own mind.
Yeah. And so that gives you a more kind of a nicer environment in which to write stuff. You get feedback from each other. You can divvy up the work. You don't have to do it all yourself. Yeah, I suppose at the end you don't own anything, but then the purpose of this isn't really that. It's not to own something. It's to spread knowledge and spread ideas. And so doing that through an open source network like Me Promo Bitcoin seemed like a reasonable way to go. But it also then gives you, once we finish that, I think it gives us as individuals a bit of authority as well, that we can say, actually, yeah, I'm an author of, you know, let me grab that chapter that we wrote, you know, because that's applicable to your business or whatever. So yeah. So that's kind of how I've journeyed from discovering Bitcoin to being able to bring it together with my previous background and synthesize potentially something that I think is monetizable, although that's not my personal objective. It's to monetize it would reflect that we were bringing value, I suppose. Yeah, is the kind of point of it. The fact that it potentially being monetizable and that's just monetizing my time as a consultant, basically.
Well, that's the missing key point, which I think we really wanted to kind of dive into. For people to make the jump from mining fiat to saying no, drawing a line in the sand, and bringing their skill set into the Bitcoin space, of course, it would be very easy if you had a company running this and you needed to hire consultants. You'd have a queue of people out the door, especially if you're going to be able to supply them with payment, preferably in Bitcoin, some kind of employee perks, you know, like everything that they're used to in the fiat world, which has them trapped. We're nowhere near that point yet.
Yeah, that's right. Now, I said I would never work fiat before. I would accept payment in fiat from a business that was paying me to go and do Bitcoin consulting. That I would accept that as a compromise, you know.
Of course. Well, they're not going to be set up. They won't be set up. They'll have to pay in fiat. But let's say your company xyz.com and you need the consultants. Consultants would prefer, I suppose, because you're going to need Bitcoiners to come and understand this, you know, what you're trying to deliver. My thinking being, let's say you're 2 years down the line, you've got this company up and running, for example, and you do need 10 consultants because now the need is there, right? They've seen what's happened to MicroStrategy and MetaPlanet, and no longer is this brushed off in the boardroom, and it is on the table front, because like you said before, you have a fiduciary duty, right? You have to.
It's negligent.
I still can't believe
once you've spoken to me and I've told you, you're negligent if you don't do this.
Very few people understand that. Seemingly most CEOs.
Yeah, well, what can I say?
What can I? To me, and obviously to you that understand this, it's unbelievable. It truly is. I mean, Saylor announced August 2020. Sure, nobody knew who MicroStrategy was. But my goodness, 4 years later, and if you're running a company and you still have not had the conversation because of what? Because of the risk to your career? Is it still career risk that people won't bring up the word Bitcoin in a boardroom?
Yeah, I think there is still a lot of that, yeah. It's, if you don't say the word and nobody mentions it, then you're not negligent. The moment you start talking about it, there's something you've got to do.
Wow. So all the sleeper plebs listening to this right now, all they have to do is walk into a boardroom meeting, just smash through the door, Bitcoin, 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 and walk back out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And probably get fired. But
that's a way. You can't force these things in the same way as you can kind of get yourself in front of the pub landlord and say, look, I think you should take Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And they can still tell you to fuck off anyway, right? Even then, right?
Oh, happens every day, mate.
Yeah.
I'm used to those no's.
Yeah. But But yeah, to do that inside a large organization is it's a much more complex thing because yeah, even having the conversation can be an issue. Not only finding the people, understanding their roles and their power inside the organization, whether that's expert power or authority, what we call authoritative power, um, or the what's the third sort, referential power, which is the sort of thing that certain people have, even though they're not necessarily, it's not related to their expertise or their position. They're just that kind of person that knows a lot of people, and it just it has a lot of power that comes purely through who they are and their network of people and operating in the organization. So you don't know who you're talking to, right? You don't know it, even if you're just at a pub and someone, or what's your job? And they tell you what your job is. A bit like what we were saying before about our parents not knowing what our jobs were. It's the same when you speak to someone else of your age in a corporation. They'll tell you your job. You actually don't know what it is unless they literally happen to do the same as you.
Yeah, I know exactly.
Yeah.
I worked on open floor brokerage rooms my whole career, and you would walk over to another desk. Oh, what you doing? Oh, time of these NDFs. You're like, yeah, okay, I'll just go over here and quote my numbers. Oh, what do you do? Foreign exchange options. You had no clue.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
no idea of each other's markets.
Yeah. And that's in the trading floor. Yeah, you go in another entirely different department.
Yep. Even worse. Like,
Yeah.
so like the Chinese walls that exist in these huge corporations are real. They're huge.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting that I know people listening to this will sit in some of these meetings, and they will be biting their tongue,
Yeah,
and not mentioning Bitcoin,
yeah,
at those meetings,
yeah,
because they're afraid of the side eye they're going to get,
yeah.
or like they'll have their card marked. It's like, oh yeah, that's the weird guy who talks about Bitcoin.
Mm. I think that if they're a CFO or they're a CRO, Chief Risk Officer, I think that they ethically have a duty to do this on behalf of their shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
Put aside their duty to their community and the society of helping a company that they work for, navigate future possible substantial change. Just focusing on their own shareholders, they have a duty to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't necessarily ask, even the CEO to do something. The CEO might delegate it to a CRO or a CFO to go and have a look at it. And it doesn't have to be, it's not about we're investigating a particular tactic. It's not that we're looking at accepting Bitcoin, or we're looking at putting Bitcoin on our treasury balance sheet, or we're looking at a new product incorporating Bitcoin. That's not where you start. Where you start is, here's a new technology. Where might it affect our markets, our products, our processes? Where is that potentially negative, and what can we do to mitigate that? What's the likelihood and the timeline of that? And then what can we do to mitigate it? And then what are the opportunities? How can we build additional value off the back of this technology change? So if you approach it in a very straight way, you're not coming in trying to sell a particular avenue. You're just trying to look at the topic and get some knowledge inside the organization. Now, you could get that knowledge in and you do the analysis, you say, no, either we don't think this is ever going to happen, or the probability of it happening is extremely low, or it's 20 years away, so we'll put it on the shelf for the next 10. We'll get it off again in 10 and have another look. Even if you reach that conclusion, at least you've done like the due diligence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
You could even turn around and say this needs to be at least a quarterly discussion.
But you might do the analysis and say, actually, our conclusion is that this is 20 years away and its probability is tiny. And if your analysis ends up showing that, then maybe you don't need to talk about it every quarter. Maybe you could just put it on the back burner get it off the shelf in 10 years' time. When, of course, I expect you'll find that you were wrong. But but at least you've done the task. I don't think that that's going to actually happen. I think most people, if you put two people on it, they got a bit of education, they started looking at it, I think they're likely to come back with things like, if this happens in this area of our business and that area of our business, the impact could be enormous. What's the probability? It's reasonably likely. I mean, or at least not a long way from zero, and its materiality would be very high. Okay, well then we perhaps. And what do we think about the timeline? Well, probably it could happen in 3 years, maybe 5, and outside 10, let's say 5. But really, we should start thinking about the things that we might do then. Doesn't mean we actually action them now, but let's get together and have workshops about how could we address this threat? How could we exploit this opportunity? So you're just starting some balls rolling for possible future projects and programs that you could execute across the business in different areas. So it's all you're doing is doing an assessment, a little bit of internal organizational learning. That's not for everybody. That's for one or two appointed individuals. And maybe you'd be lucky and you'd find someone in finance or risk who's already got some Bitcoin knowledge. Great. We probably don't need that much training then. They get a sort of tap on the shoulder. I've heard that you're a bit about Bitcoin. Look, we want to have a look at the potential threats and opportunities for our business. You fancy owning this risk for the organization and going producing a bit of a report? Fantastic opportunity, I would say, for a Bitcoin in an organization. Doesn't mean you're not asking them to turn around and recommend all the things they should do. Yeah, you need to get Bitcoin on your balance sheet. You need to start accepting Bitcoin here. Speak to these guys at Bridge to Bitcoin. Do this. That's not the way. The way is to just do the analysis. Yeah.
So what you're writing, you're kind of me premier for grown-ups, if I might call it that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And let's say
I'll mention that title to Hector. This is Hector Alvaro. Do you know him in Miami? Who's PMing us? So I'll mention that.
Perfect.
Bitcoin for grown-ups.
Will that be? Is the idea to open source that, or kind of roll that out as right? Okay. So this is going to get
So it'll just come out in the same way as they're. Yeah, once it's finished, it'll just be like the existing curriculum that they have. It's just like, here you are.
So awesome. Then there's absolutely. So if you are the sleeper Bitcoiner in your organization, all you need is one of these. So I've got the Me Prima here.
Yeah.
This is prospectus or the diploma or
the curriculum. Yeah, the curriculum. Yeah.
Any old kind of like research, training textbook for the anyone to go through, not for kids, but anyone. And this is amazing. So to have these kind of prospectuses
and that's aimed at individuals. So that's aimed at individuals understanding Bitcoin. What this is about is helping organizations to assess Bitcoin.
But a pleb could have one of these in hand. Given like he maybe picks one of these up at a conference and he takes it back and he is in a board meeting and then he can just say, guys, this needs real due diligence. And I'd be happy to go through it, but we're at risk of being held negligent if we do not look into this, because it's the same. Could you imagine if you'd have sat there and ignored the ESG, like as a corporation? No one did, right? No one did. They all just fell in line.
Whatever they believed, they couldn't ignore it. No.
And what's incredible is KPMG have even come out and done a great piece about Bitcoin and ESG. But it has to be in the narrative somewhere. But yet still people have their heads in the sand. So, wow, man, 2025 could be like the year that, once you've got this thing done and ready and people can start getting it out there and in front of your chief risk officer or your CFO. And when MicroStrategy starts accounting for Bitcoin on their balance sheet next year. And those numbers start coming in.
So I mean, there will be a number of things coming in the corporate world, sort of information interaction with corporations where Bitcoin will keep popping up, and that will certainly spark some conversations. I would thought, and what I hope is that this manual or this sort of piece of educational material will just help some entities, whatever industry you work in, or whatever your particular function inside the company that you work in, you just be able to read that chapter. And there's a whole load of other sort of chapters before it which explore Bitcoin more generally, but at a sort of slightly higher or more corporate level than that curriculum that you just got off the shelf, because that's aimed at all plebs. Whereas we think we have reasonable expectation that senior people in corporations already speak a certain language and already we can understand that they have a level of financial or organizational or educational background that means that we can assume certain stuff which maybe we can't across the whole population. Yeah. So we can address that in the sort of first chapters, and then we look at functions and we look at some of the key verticals. We haven't been able to do, we're not going to be able to do every vertical in the first edition because there's a lot there. But we've chosen some particularly important ones that we think are particularly important, including government, in fact. So I wrote the government chapter a couple of weeks ago. That was interesting.
Amazing.
That was
so
interesting.
what is the plan once it's finished?
Because this isn't just corporations, this is all organizations. So, and I'm just about to start on charities and not-for-profits. We've done banking and payments, we've done professional services, what else have we done? IT, trying to think of a couple of others. Anyway, but yeah, so we're covering different functions, and then inside the organization, one of the functions we're looking at inside is treasury management, and another one is risk management. And we've got a couple of others which are just slightly not going to be in the first run, like marketing, which I think is quite important. But the rest of the team didn't think it was as important as I did, so it got put into the amber rather than the green.
So do you think, I'm just thinking about the plebs that are listening to this, once they've got this kind of information in their hand, they're armed with this tool that you guys are putting together, do you think they could perhaps, start using that and freelancing themselves out if they had this same kind of experience that you've got? And this would be a bridge to them away from bringing their fiat skills into the Bitcoin world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. No reason why not at all. I mean, they could start potentially, if they're in a role, having a chat with the risk officer or the finance officer in their own company and going, look, just one-to-one, look, I've been looking at this, and I think that for our organization that maybe, these products that we've got, the way we service this market and there might be a threat there, or there might be an opportunity there. What do you think? So just start. So if they're already in a role, they can kind of almost convert their role over time within their own organization. Yeah.
Can you think of an example of what a threat might be? That because if you can find a problem and then offer a solution, that is always the best way to go around things.
Well, say that I'm in the business of news publishing. I don't know about you, but I used to subscribe to The Economist and often by the FT, particularly at the weekend. I refuse to do that, and have done for the last 2 or 3 years, because I refuse to support these what I now see as institutions that are spreading misinformation about Bitcoin, basically. So I'm not going to provide them with financial support by being a customer. However, there are a number of articles that I would like to read, and therefore I'm often faced with a paywall. Now, I'm not going to subscribe, but if you allowed me to pay per article, micro payments per article, then absolutely, I'd probably pay to read that article on a article by article basis, but I'm not subscribing. There's a threat there to the existing subscription model in the long run, but they're already under threat just from the general decline in the market for newspapers and journalism generally. So they're already under threat. This is probably not going away. But there's a combined opportunity to open up an enormous untapped market of people who don't pay you anything at all, right? Yes, there might be a threat to some of your subscriptions, but how big is that market of people that pay you nothing at all, right? They see the headline, they click on it. You've literally found them. They've come to your door, they've knocked on it, and you've put up a file. They go, I'm not subscribing. How many times a day does that happen? I mean, I'd love to see some stats on it, but I bet it's hundreds of thousands of times a day in every newspaper, right? I bet it, and probably more, right? They're just turning away customers. And the reason they're doing that is because they haven't seen the opportunity offered by Bitcoin micropayments, right? I mean, so there's an example of a threat and an opportunity together in the publishing industry, or in the newspaper article publishing industry, so to be more specific. It's not particularly about books, but yeah, article publishing. So
for anybody listening, it's just a thought process going through the exercise of where are the threats in your business, and how does Bitcoin fix this? So then, but you've got to be good at delivering the threat and finding that threat. You know, this might just be, it might be around the corner, it might be 5 years, 10 years from now. But if you find the threat and raise that as, you know, certainly something to keep an eye on, what the legacy way of doing things is like, oh shit, let's hire, you know, McKinsey or, you know, one of the big four to come and assess this and show us where our threats are, and we'll just throw a bunch of money at them, and then they'll sail off into the wind. But they're not even. They're not even.
No. So professional services is one of the chapters. So one of the chapters we've written is aimed at the professional services firms, saying, like, you guys need to be on this.
It's supposed to be consulting.
There's a whole load of business here that's going to potentially come your way if you've actually got the skills, right? But what I unfortunately, I have experienced this a bit in my life directly. That unfortunately, what tends to happen a lot of these places is that they're often employed for political or rubber stamping purposes, and when they are asked to do things that they don't have the skills for, they sign up for it and then they go and find the skills. So they don't come with the ideas. They go and find the people they need after they've already got the contract, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, 80% of these people's job is just like hitting the phones, trying to get the next contract in at all costs. Rather than doing the deep research and analysis that you've been hired to do. You've got to have that pipeline filled.
And the reality is that successful businesses have to take responsibility for that, right? If you're going to succeed as a corporation, your C-suite has to be doing this. You have to be looking at the horizon in your business. No McKinsey or Bain or Deloitte or PwC is going to do that for you. They don't have the knowledge of your business that you do, whatever they tell you, in order to get the deal. They don't. And how could they? How could they, right? You're working in that business day and out. You might have been there 5, 10, 15 years. You might have worked in a similar business before that. So you really probably know far better than anyone else what's the reality. So you're in the best position to work out where these threats might come from. And you're also in the best place to start looking at mitigations and to develop opportunities as well. So yeah, I mean, they're all the threats and opportunities are over. I mean, there's a generic opportunity for many businesses, particularly in the high end consumer markets. Here's a demographic of people who we call Bitcoiners today, who are growing in number and growing in wealth. You can talk to them today. That's a great opportunity if this is right. If what's going to happen, if you think that this has a realistic chance, how about you talk to them today in your luxury hotel group and start doing something that's going to tempt them into your business? Now, in that case, maybe that's accepting Bitcoin. I mean, again, I don't want to get into the solutions, but just for example, you might say, well, I'm going to start accepting Bitcoin because maybe these Bitcoiners that get richer, they might be moving up a notch or two in the hotels they like to stay in, right? and maybe there's going to be more and more of them. And conversely, on the other side, how's that going to change how the world works? What are the second order impacts of this demographic rising? Because they're not just in America or just in Europe. They're not just 55 or 25. You know, they're not black or white. They're across everything. Yeah. How does that change your market for, I don't know, interior decorating products? To think like it kind of doesn't matter what your business is. There's going to be things that affect your markets and your products, right? Would our Bitcoin, how do they split out in the way they think? Are they more in the space of wanting products that last a long time, that are built well, that are engineered well, that are prepared to pay premiums for these things, rather than fast, disposable, small lifetime things? So do Bitcoiners fit into that? Actually, what I would argue is a very natural ESG idea of repair and mend, reuse, all of these ideas that are very good for the environment. My sense is that a lot of Bitcoiners actually fit in that space. You know, and it's not just because I run a 22-year-old car. I love it, and I will pay every year skilled mechanics to keep it on the road for as long as I can. I'm not going to replace it until I literally can't keep it on the road anymore because I like it. And I don't see buying a new electric car to replace that old lovely BMW petrol is good for the environment. As a whole, my judgment is it's bad for the environment to do that, with all of the energy that goes into producing the car in the first place, all of the new mining and chemicals and everything that goes into producing the batteries, etc. My judgment is that and I'm the one placing the value on this, not the government and not the regulators. My value says that it's better for me to employ skilled people in my local community to keep fixing this car because it works and I like it.
100%.
You know, and how does that affect businesses who produce consumer tat? Right? What are you going to do? How are you going to adjust to this scenario?
And I think as well, just on a very basic level, looking at one of the threats is like, do you want to be behind the eight ball? And this is what's great about Musket's offering, and this is what I tell pubs, restaurants, cafes, barbers all the time when I'm trying to explain, to them. It's like, don't get caught behind the eight ball. Have a point of sale system ready to be able to accept Bitcoin payments for when this flood comes, because it's coming. Might be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, but that is a threat. The threat is market shifts and you're not ready.
Yep. And when that does happen, if I'm honest, I think that flip isn't imminent. But when it does happen, there'll be nowhere near enough people to sort businesses out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're snowed under quite a lot at Bridge to Bitcoin now, and the idea of us trying to deal with sorting out 10,000 business, it's just not. We're not going to be able to do it. So it is true that if we get to that, when we get to that kind of flip over, if it happens fast, which it might, then there will simply not be enough resources to help businesses do that at that point. Yeah, that's correct.
Lots to think about, plebs.
Yeah.
There's so much here that they're going to be able to, mull on once they've listened to this episode, and reach out to myself or to yourself or to Bridge to Bitcoin, because I think a great way to cut your teeth is to go along and volunteer at one of the events. I know you guys do the expo hall, right? That we have.
Yeah, the expo. Yeah, we've been there a couple of times this year. We had our own stand, and I actually volunteered on the Musket stand a couple of weeks ago at the business show, just because they've got their product's more complex from a sales point of view, because it's merging both fiat and Bitcoin into one solution. So you have to talk about, with debit cards, is it 5p plus 0.5%, and I'm going to get the numbers wrong here because it was 2 weeks ago and I've already half forgotten, but I did write them down so that I knew when I'm talking to other businesses. But yeah, there's a lot of detail to their process, whereas with Bitcoin, like it's we just know that because there's no sorts of lots of different interfaces with Bitcoin. There's one point of sale solution, and this is how it works. Well, for each solution. Whereas, yeah, I mean, remembering that for Visa it's this, and Amex it's that, and if it's always this debit card it's this, and then the different packages that you can get, it's much more complex in number terms. For the salesperson, the business it's great because it's all in one, but for the salesperson it's more complicated.
Right, James, it's been really very thought-provoking, and what you're doing with you and the rest of the team there, I think, is going to bring in a hell of a lot of new businesses. At the very least, lots more discussion around the board table, which obviously that's goal number one. Goal number two, having plebs ready to be able to deliver what you've done in a professional manner. And it's great that this is the way this is happening, and you guys are ahead of the curve to get this on the table, so plebs can plug into that. So, eyes on you. How can people best reach you? Is it just your Twitter, or have you got other places where people can learn about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Twitter and Noster. I'm Bitcoin Shire. Well, I'm Bitcoin Shire on both, and I think you can get it. Is it the Nippo 5 link or whatever? It can be found on Noster. I mean, obviously, you don't want me to read out the
No.
pub key right now, but yeah, all via Bridge to Bitcoin. I mean, there's three of us, behind that. But if that's any way you can find us, just drop a DM there. It's fine.
Well, you've got the final question coming your way. If you had one last orange pill left to give to somebody, who would you give it to and why?
I remember that from 2 years ago, and I said, what was his name? The guy behind the pub chain, Weatherspoons.
Behind Witherspoons, yeah. Well,
yeah, he was my answer last time 2 years ago. I should have prepared this, shouldn't I? Who would I give it to? Can I choose him again?
Why not? Double down.
What's his name? Sorry, this is terrible, isn't it? Let me just look at it.
And for American listeners,
Martin, isn't it?
Wetherspoons are a pub chain in the UK that specialize in offering, well, not lower cost pints of beer. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And I think the business model is he mass purchases beer that is towards its expiry date. So a lot of the pubs, they don't want that. So
but it allows breweries to get some value out of their excess stock. Yeah.
Right. So he's a good bridge between like the breweries that just have that sitting around, hasn't been shipped. He steps in through his pub network.
Yeah.
They take it, but obviously they have to fire sell it, and that can push the price down to attract customers in.
It's a bit like TK Maxx's with clothes and some sort of longer life groceries, except obviously their time period isn't quite as compressed as this needs selling this weekend, right? Which is, I think, quite often. But it's a very clever business model, and he's done great work. It's Tim Martin is his name.
Martin.
Yeah.
And then
he's an Aussie, isn't he, as well? I think originally.
I am not sure, mate. I'm not sure.
Better just check that, because I don't want to. If he's from New Zealand, that would be very upsetting for him.
It would be great to have some Bitcoiners sit down and have a conversation with him and explain the amount, if the whole chain started accepting Bitcoin, and obviously Musket are there, UK-based company, just to plug him straight in, how many Bitcoin meetups around the country would just shift straight to
Wetherspoons, yeah.
Straight to Wetherspoons, private room, private corner, whatever it is. Yeah. The whole chain would be having hosting meetups weekly at the very least.
And when you look now on the meetup lists that come out, the newsletter that comes out every week from Bitcoin events now, you're averaging one a day.
Wow.
In the summer it's been more like 1.5 a day. You get 10 or 11. Sorry, 10 or 11 in a week. And then in the winter, it's maybe just slightly under one a day. But, you know, over the year, it's probably got to one a day now across the UK.
And I know in the Kent meetup, there's no one that accepts Bitcoin. Like, you know, so we have to go and spend fiat. That would suck. So Weatherspoons would all of a sudden capture that meetup group. And we're not talking huge amounts of money, of course not. But like you said, if there is an average of 1.5 a day, then that just keeps imagine like the sats just rolling in each day to Weatherspoons, because that's where the meetups are happening. That's where the conversations are happening. That's where people are getting together, educating each other, and it only grows. So there's a huge opportunity. Yeah, massive shout. And if anybody
was educated, so he is English. He was educated in New Zealand, so I'm glad I checked that before.
Right, okay.
An Aussie,
So
but
Tim
he's British,
Martin,
but he was educated in New Zealand, which is why he's got the accent.
Tim Martin, Weatherspoons, any plebs listening that can get us in touch, reach out. James and I will go and meet him wherever, face to face.
If you work for Weatherspoons, or you're a brewery that supplies Weatherspoons, you know, either have a think about it, get in touch, wait for this new course to come out, and then have a read of it and apply it into your business. Think about
the classic threat and opportunity.
It's not just accepting Bitcoin; there are other things as well.
This is the classic threat and opportunity that you were talking about, right?
Yeah.
You know, the threat for Weatherspoons being, you know, the last in the hospitality arena to accept Bitcoin instead of being the first. That's the opportunity. The opportunity is it'd be on the front pages. Like, all you've got to do is "we accept Bitcoin" headline, GB News, everywhere. It would be like, it's just so simple.
Yeah.
Well, it's not, obviously, because, you know, it's a countrywide business and there's a lot of back end stuff.
They would still, as a big company, they would still need to go through the process in a considered manner, unlike when you just onboard the local pub, where we do it on a Zoom call and they're good to go and we're down there that evening for a pint. You know, it's a bigger deal, but to get that ball rolling, and not the ball rolling on accepting Bitcoin, the ball rolling about, well, what are the threats and the opportunities of the rise of this money? Do that assessment. It's a very large company, you know, so do that assessment as you would do it. Maybe you'll find that one of the things you might choose to do is accept Bitcoin off the back of your analysis. Yeah. So don't start with the answer, start with the analysis, and then, you know, so yeah, it would take months to do, but it would be, you know,
yeah. What's the threat to the price of a pint in 10 years' time, and what's the opportunity to offset that?
Yeah. Well, certainly, the more Bitcoiners we can have in the UK, and I mean, I know this is an international audience, but the same rule applies to every country, then the better off everyone in this country is going to be in the future, in my view. So we all believe that. That's why we go around trying to help people that we know in our families, in our friend groups, places, workplaces, because we're trying to help people. They might think that we're idiots, that we're evangelists for some crazy idea, but the reality is we think this is going to happen, and so we know, we have a sense of how you can put yourself in a better position, how you can take an action today that will lead to you being in a more advantageous position in future. And, you know, and that applies to businesses as well as individuals. Yeah.
Mate, excellent talk. Thank you so much for coming on. Thanks for everything you're doing for Bitcoin and education, and for giving up your time. And look forward to the next time we actually get to meet, hopefully at a Bedford game. We need to get up there. We've not been up there yet since getting back on the shores. So, but we will see you at some stage. If not before Christmas, then certainly in 2025.
Yeah. Can you make it to the Surrey Christmas dinner or not?
I don't know. I'll reach out to Chris and find out what's going on.
Yeah, because that's a new pub that they're onboarded in Farnham in Surrey. So
wow. Okay. I'll get the details and I'll let you know.
Yeah. Anyway, it's been a pleasure, Daniel, and yeah, look forward to meeting up with you and the family likewise as soon as we can.
Excellent.
Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.